Happy Wednesday night, everybody. Welcome to Deep in the Plus. I'm your host, Rob Whiteside. Thank you, as always, for being with us. And again, if you have not already, please subscribe to WDWNT TV and click like for this video as it helps people to find us. Tonight, I have a very special guest with me. It is, he's 16 going on 17. It's Mr. Ron Deanna.
Hey Rob, how's it going?
Going well, sir. How are you?
I'm doing good. Finally glad to talk about this with you.
It's funny that you and I kind of went in the same vein of we don't really have Sound of Music t-shirts, so we both went music. You've got Dr. Teeth, I've got Taylor Swift. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. So again, the
I
movie
didn't
we're
take you for
talking.
a Swifty.
What? Do what?
I didn't take you for a Swifty.
Dude, don't ever underestimate me. Come on. Um, so, so tonight we're talking about The Sound of Music. We've been teeing this up for a while. Ron, you picked this because you also do a show called Ron Hasn't Seen It, and you have not seen this movie. You've never seen this movie before.
No, so the channel I started earlier this at the beginning of the year. Uh, Last year I set myself the mission of trying to see a new movie I hadn't seen every week. Uh, and I wasn't happy with some of my choices. I would just be like, oh, it's Saturday night, I haven't watched anything. I'm going to put on a DC animated film or something, right? And I wanted to make that mission a little bit more meaningful to me. So what I went ahead and did is I decided to push myself by doing a channel, and I'm going to see classic films or something I think that's somewhat important or in some sort of theme that I haven't seen before. And I started off with uh, one of the first movies I did was Shawshank Redemption, because it's one of those movies people would go up to me and go, what do you mean you haven't seen it? Like, I'm known as a film guy. I worked in the industry. I, took film classes. People are like, how have you missed some of these things? And that's what the channel is. So it's me and sometimes guests. You're going to be recording an episode of this later after this with me, and this will be out probably on my channel next week. It's so very similar to what we do here, but I like to go into a little more history and a little more things like that. So sometimes it's just me. Sometimes I have guests on.
Yeah, and it's not always a Disney product when you're doing it. This
It's
one,
it's
the
not usually.
yeah, the rule we have on this show is it has to be on Disney Plus. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of things that we have not seen or talked about, like Tower of Terror or Anastasia or the original Maleficent. We haven't talked about them because it breaks the rules. It is not has not been on Disney Plus, and so we can't talk about it. So this one, Deep in the Plus, we only talk about stuff that's on Disney Plus. And the funny thing about this movie is it's not originally a Disney movie, although it feels like it, doesn't it? It's a musical. It's got Julie Andrews in it. It was in the 60s. It feels like it could have been a Disney movie, but it wasn't until they made the Fox purchase. So this is one of those Fox movies that just kind of slides nicely into the Disney catalog. One of my favorite stories to tell about this is that when we were at D23 and Christina Aguilera was getting her award for Disney Legend, she said, oh, my favorite Disney movie growing up was The Sound of Music. And I was actually sitting next to Tom, and I said, but it wasn't a Disney movie then, Christina. Come on, be better than that. It just so happened that Disney had just bought Fox, and so it was okay and it counted. But this one is not a legacy Disney movie. And one of the things that has bothered me from the beginning as well is that when we look at this across the board, we have Disney, Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, National Geographic, but we don't have a place for Fox. And I wondered, Ron, do you think that that's by design because they want to kind of infuse what is Disney and what is Fox? Or do you think there's not enough Fox content? Like, why Nat Geo and not Fox, do you think?
I don't know. I think it's brands they want to promote, but I'm thinking like in other markets where Hulu and Disney Plus are combined, you get those kind of things. Do you get because they'll have some of like Alien and Predator and stuff on Disney
Right.
Plus in other markets. So I wonder if that is an option there.
Maybe. I've never seen it. I just think that this is usually the scenario they go through. But with this one in particular, it feels a lot like a Disney movie, but it is a musical. It was based on the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical of the same name, The Sound of Music. And the weird thing about this too is the timing of it. It was 1965. In 1964, a little movie called Mary Poppins came out, also about a nanny or a governess, played by Julie Andrews, carrying a big satchel. Like, come on, that's very,
Yeah.
I mean, it feels really similar, right?
Well, I mean, part of it was that Andrews was their first pick to play Maria. At least this version of the film that they were working on to play Maria was Julie Andrews, and Mary Poppins hadn't been out yet. So the directors and producers got to go on to Disney Lot to watch some of the dailies and the incomplete footage to see how she was doing in that.
Yeah, and again, I mean, this was an amazing time for her. Two musicals back to back, two really big productions, awards, the whole gamut. So this was, the big deal, and she was. I mean, it's kind of hinges around her. This movie as Maria, the governess here. When you watch this movie for the first time and you're going through and are you thinking a lot about the history of this, because this is an actual story that happened in 1938? Are when you were watching this, are you kind of attaching the history to it as well, or did you just get lost in the sound of music, Ron?
When I'm watching it, I most associated, like, even though I haven't seen the film before, I knew all the songs, and I think everybody who did a lot of kids concerts growing up knew all the songs. Like, we would have to sing Do Re Mi and 16 17, like in these like kids choruses we would do like in kindergarten and stuff like that. So that's what came to my mind, and my wife looked over at me and goes like, "You're singing, you know everything, but you've never seen the movie before," and that's part of it.
Yeah.
That's
When
the history. I know there's some problems with, and I was going to talk a little bit that more on my show because it's more of what I do. But yeah, there's the history. Knowing it was somewhat a real story does impact the movie.
yeah. Let's talk about like iconic is the intro to this with her on the hill. As they pan in, this seems like something very cinematic for the time. As they pan in and she's walking across the hill, we're seeing her for the first time, and I can't show too much at once because YouTube will cut me off. But the one thing that I noticed this time more than any other is that when they get up close to her and she starts to turn, and then it cuts, and it's like, okay, all right, great, all right. It's not like today we would have seen like a CGI like merge of the long shot with the close up, and it would have been very seamless. But for the
Or you could
time,
be
this
using
looks
a
amazing.
drone,
True.
like at the time,
Yeah.
like you could have used a drone and have it keep spinning around her. But it's very clearly a helicopter shot, and it. I mean, as much as she's the star of this movie, Austria is the star of this movie too. This that's one of the things that just grabs you, and this opening shot does that with you're just lost in the place because I'm not going to say it's the most unique. There's plenty of alpine villages and stuff like that, but it's idyllic in every sense of the word, like most of the nature shots in this film, and like Old Town Salzburg as well.
Yeah, before we get again too much into the movie itself, just thinking about it from the outside, this is rated G, and it's kind of scary. Like, I mean, the whole overlying theme of, Germany is taking over Austria, the Nazis are coming. There's a scary factor to that for something that is rated G. Do you feel like this would be a PG at least in 2023?
Probably, I think we're a little more sensitive to things like that. But I still don't know if there's enough actual violence to put it into a PG. But like, so many kids' cartoons get it today just for thematic elements is one of the things they say in the ratings, right? Like, what does that mean? Like, everything
Yeah.
has to have thematic elements. Um, I think we're much less careful with G ratings. Like, one of the things I always thought was a strange movie that was G was, Star Trek the Motion Picture was a G rating originally. And, there's some light cursing in it. I'll say, like, the stuff you could probably get away with on primetime television once or twice. But, like, things like that, like, I don't think modern day you'd be able to get away with anything like that. And I wonder if it's the more modern or just the fact that like when they add the PG-13 in the mid '80s, they just kind of reevaluated the spectrum in general.
Maybe. But again, that's what strikes me when I'm watching these older movies is that probably, it was a simpler time. I mean, we didn't have PG-13 yet. PG, is probably something a little bit more. I mean, it was probably very true to like, was there any nudity? Were there any bad words? And pretty much keeping it at that
I mean,
rather than the themes.
wasn't Jaws like a PG movie back in the 70s. Like that would not be PG at all. To like even PG-13, I think the amount of blood we see in that movie would push it right into R.
Probably. Let's talk about one more thing about the time frame. Julie Andrews was born in 1935. This movie came out in 1965, but it was about an event in 1938. So this was kind of like I look back at this and I look at this. Oh, this is a kind of a period piece, right? This is a throwback. This actually happened in her lifetime. And so I wonder if there was any, like, if she had any connection to that then. It seems like the kind of thing that, like, by 1965, we're like, did that really happen? And, 1935 to 1938. In 1938, she's 3 years old when these events are actually happening. So I wonder if that meant anything to her when when she was doing this movie.
Could be, and I also think like it was presented so contemporary. Like the Maria von Trapp's memoir that this is based off came out in 1949. The original German movie that
The
adapted this
1956.
came out in 56.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't that far removed. And I mean, they were making World War II films during World War II, so like it was. I think it was considered a more contemporary. I think like it feels weird that we consider like like we consider Stranger Things period pieces to us now, and we were kids
Because it's the 80s.
at that time. So I guess it's still a period piece.
Yeah, no, I get where you're going with that. So this takes place in Salzburg, Austria, and the title card says in the last golden days of the 30s. So they've placed us in Austria here. Maria is I guess she's trying to become a nun. And so she is, as she opens up, she's up in the hills. She's singing the sound of music. She runs down into back into the abbey. She gets there, and all the nuns are trash talking her in song. That's what's really funny about that to me is I don't know if you've seen the SNL sketch where Ariana Grande is Maria, and she kind of comes out and like gives it back to them because they really kind of are trash talking her. Like, how do you solve a problem like Maria? And again, you probably knew the song coming in.
I grew up with that song in my house because my mom's name is Maria,
Ah.
and like a lot of my uncles would always sing that to her.
Well, I
You know,
mean, there was probably a lot of music because of the whole "I just met a girl named Maria" from West Side Story.
yeah. Same
Nice.
director, same producer.
Yeah. Yeah, and it does seem like there were a lot of musicals happening during this time. So then the nuns are singing they're trashing her song, and then the Reverend Mother gives her this new job, and I think that the setup there is she's not a very good nun, right? Like that's the whole thing is she's late, she's not into it, her head's in the clouds, and so the Reverend Mother sends her over to the Von Trapps to be the new governess. And apparently there've been like a dozen before her that have not worked out. And we find out that the children are kind of monsters, but she handles it super well. And you and I did a review of Bluey and talked about Bandit being like super dad. Like she's kind of like super nanny, almost Mary Poppins ish in here. As good as she is with everything they throw at her, she never seems to be in conflict with the kids. She never seems to lose a step with the kids. She seems to, for someone who's never had kids theoretically here that we know of, she's coming into a situation where she's going to deal with seven children of various ages and seems to really kind of kill it. So I mean, do we think that that came from Maria's book? That she, as she's writing the book, tells how awesome she was, or do you think they built the character to be the perfect nanny?
I think they definitely cinematic that up because one of the things some of the interviews with the Von Trapp, the actual Von Trapp or just Trapp children, as they sometimes are known because they're supposed to have dropped the Von at some point. Um, their father wasn't a bad father, so they weren't these like ridiculous kids, from my understanding. So I think that was definitely one of the things because I think when it's Robert Wise as director, right?
Yes.
Um, when he sat down to talk with Maria von Trapp and basically said, "Look, we're making your book, but we're making it a movie. So we're going to embellish things. We're going to make it a good movie, not a true book." And I think that's probably one of the things that played into that.
Yeah. When you agreed
But
or suggested, go ahead.
But I think the Mary Poppins thing, the whole comparing it the whole time was in my head. And
Right.
one of the things that was most comparing is maybe it's because I saw Mary Poppins as a kid and I'm a an adult older than the characters at this point, but Mary Poppins seemed so much more mature and put together than Maria does to me. And it's interesting because she's, well, was a year younger, but still, it's like Mary Poppins felt like she was a character in her mid 30s to me, while, Maria definitely feels like someone in their 20s. And that just to me is Julie Andrews just being amazing and
Yeah.
playing those things.
And yeah, and playing it as very like doe-eyed and innocent and young and yeah. But talking about the ages, she was 30 when this was released, so 1965. The Christopher Plummer was 6 years older than her, and Liesel was 7 years younger than her. So Liesel was not 16 going on 17, but was more like 20s, 23 going on 24.
Yeah, I forget the actress's name offhand, but she got really famous for this, and then kind of
Char- Charmaine Carr.
a couple years later, just she was done.
Yeah. But
But
apparently
yeah,
she went on to do interior decorating, so I thought that was kind of interesting. And a lot of the cast. I mean, let's go ahead and talk about the cast. A lot of the cast has unfortunately passed away, including the Baroness, and a lot of them in like the teens of the 20 teens, the 2013 timeline. So obviously Julie's still with us, but Christopher Plummer died in 2021, I believe, and then the Baroness and some of the people that played the kids, and so including Liesel. Um, it again, it's not that old a movie, but it's 58 years old. It's going to be 60
yeah,
in 2 years. So, um, yeah, I mean, I guess that's to be expected. But, um, you know, uh, Julie Andrews is still absolutely amazing.
yeah. Plummer's always good, but I always think of him as playing a stern part, and I think he did it. Like he warms up a lot in this movie, but that's not how I kind of always picture him as kind of not always the bad guy, but close to it. You know?
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting thing. Yeah, he is an interesting character, the captain, because he's not quite the bad guy, but he is very stern and rigid, and you would expect that from a captain. And he's got the whole whistle thing, and she challenges that, and maybe he respects that about her, is that he's challenging her along the way as she first gets to the house, and he's showing her all of the commands that he uses when he calls each individual child. That seems like a lot of work, by the way, to assign each of seven children a different ringtone, basically. But I guess people do it. And then he's got one all set up for her, and she's like, "No, no, 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 that's not how we're going to play this." Which again, for 1965, is a great. I mean, that's a great
Yeah.
message. Like, no, I'm not a dog. I'm not going to reply to that.
I mean, I guess you have to have a lot of time on your hands when you're a naval captain of a landlocked country.
What are you trying to say, Ron? You trying to say that it's not accurate?
Uh, I mean, obviously, he would have been more of a captain in the like fall of the Austro-Hungarian Empire before that, which obviously makes more sense. But the real von Trapp was actually like a nobleman, not a military officer. Like he was from a more noble family, and that's why the von was eventually dropped from their names when Austria got rid of that nobility. They got rid of the signifiers of nobility, including that.
Well, I mean, it's quite a mansion for somebody that was just like a dude in the war. So,
Yeah,
when you
I
first
mean,
when
they
you
did have
first see,
ancestral homes and stuff like that, which it was supposed to be, even though once again the real family had moved out of the ancestral home into like a villa in downtown Old Town or whatever. Excuse me, that they call it in Salzburg.
yeah. So again, the cast was very interesting because of the ages that they were playing and the difference in ages. But I think everybody plays their part very well. He is the patriarch of the family. He's the captain. He definitely has that kind of stature. I think that's he's amazing in this. But I think the difference to me is I feel like he's sort of, to me, every time I have ever seen him in anything, including National Treasure, he played like the grandfather, Ben's grandfather in National Treasure. I always think, oh, that's Captain von Trapp. I have him in my head, like that's always him. Because you've never seen this movie, I assume that that's not who you saw him as. Who did you see him as every time you saw him? Who is the quintessential Christopher Plummer character?
I can't think, but it's just a very old, like an old man in his like 70s, kind of like very
So
very
not this guy.
patriarchal. Very no, definitely not. Like yeah, I've always heard stories about like how you're not supposed to talk. He never liked talking about the movie, but then you'd catch him like backstage singing Edelweiss or something. Like supposedly, like he never wanted to talk about it, but he was still connected to it. And those are just I don't know how true those stories are, but those are things I've heard from other like on other shows with other celebrities.
Yeah. They were in Austria. They are Austrian, and yet none of them, other than throwing in like a Fraulein here and there, none of them have a real like accent. It's almost like they try to do it every now and then, and they didn't. It's almost like Kevin Costner in like Robin Hood. He's not even trying. She's as British as can be. And so they're not even trying to like mask that very much. I feel like if we saw this today, it would be a lot more true. Although I say that, and yet in 2013 they staged a live TV version of this with Carrie Underwood as Maria. So maybe I'm wrong. I just feel like they would that would be a thing they would try to do.
I think also, at least for an American audience, we tend to think every other country in the world, as long as they're speaking English, has some English style accent. Like that's just uh, a typical thing we do, and I think it's better than sometimes trying to do the accent and it coming off as a caricature or you know Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins. Like that over the
Or Lin
top.
Manuel and Mary Poppins.
Yeah, I think most people knew what he was doing. I think they just thought Dick Van Dyke was ridiculous.
Okay, fair enough. So you know what? You were talking about like you were singing along as this was happening. I fired this up with my wife in the room, and I never. I mean, she like nailed every single word. Like she knows this as well as like most people know the alphabet. And it was just like she was just totally immersed in it because this was a tradition for her and her family is to watch it every year. I think at Easter maybe. And so she knew all the music. But what I want to ask you is that you knew the music coming in, and I want to ask this to the chat too because I'd love to get opinions on this as well. Is it when you think of The Sound of Music, what is the first song from this? Because like you said, there are many, but what is the first song that pops into your head that you associate with this?
That's a tough one, just because there are like I have to preface this saying I usually cannot stand Rogers and Hammerstein. I do not mostly enjoy that sing-songy, kind of way they write music. And thinking of musicals as Rogers and Hammerstein is one of the things I haven't liked musicals most of my life because of. And then, like, as I got older, I got introduced to Sondheim and Jonathan Larson and more modern stuff like Wicked, who I can't remember who wrote, but like those, and Andrew Lloyd Webber and things like that. So those expanded. But this, I mean, it's sing-songy, but it's not like Oklahoma-y. But to me, the song I just always associated just because it's the one we sing most in class, other than the title. Everybody knows the title song. But Do Re Mi. I mean, it just has to be Do Re Mi. Just because every kid sings that constantly.
Yeah, okay. I mean, and for me, it was always favorite things. Like Raindrops on Roses pops into my head when you say Sound of Music. That's the first one that I think of anyway. But you're right. Like the titular song, like the hills are alive with the sound of music. You would think that would be the first one. But like I said, a lot of people really kind of I feel like there's so much music in here. There have been musicals that I've seen where, and I'm trying to remember one recently, but where maybe Fiddler on the Roof, something I hadn't seen before, that you just know so much of the music from it. Not My Fair Lady. What was the other thing that Barbra Streisand was in? Hello Dolly. That's the one. I had
Funny.
never
Oh
seen.
yeah.
Yeah, Funny Girl's another one, but I'd never seen Hello Dolly. But as soon as I was watching that musical, like at the theater, I was like, okay, I know all this music. Why do I know all this music? And a lot of it is used outside of the musical. It's used from people like in American Idol or choir practice, or like you said in elementary school teaching kids to sing. So there's a lot of this music that I've heard in other places, but I know that a lot of them uh, are are songs that really resonate with me. Michael Sullivan said Do Re Mi, and so did David, although he said doe, a deer, a female deer. Good joke. And then the sheep herder, goat herder, I meant is what Jarrett just said. Which can we talk about that scene for a second? Like
I
the
knew the song.
marionette
I had
scene.
no idea that that was coming. Like I knew this that was a song I knew, but I'm like, where did the creepy puppet show come from all of a sudden? Because it was
Right?
the marionettes were a little creepy, and I gotta say the kids were great singers, but wow, they were good puppeteers for just kind of picking that up too.
I don't really think they were doing the puppetry because there were a lot of puppets in that show, and I think even then you got seven Von Trapp kids and Anna Maria. I think that's still a lot of stuff to be able to handle with that many. And if you think about it, like one of them was sitting over to the side too. But like, yeah, the marionettes are insanely good. Every bit of it is just, I mean, but they're creepy. They're very creepy, but they're insanely articulated, accurate. Like the goats, their tails wag. I mean, when he pets the goat, like the whole thing, it's just there's so
Oh
much going
yeah.
on in that thing. And then like Max apparently bought this for them, but is going to send the bill to the dad. And so the catalyst for this is that they were a sad little family because mom had passed away and there had been no joy and singing and happiness in the house, which we've seen that in other movies and things in the past. And so, we've seen like this specifically, like, they say no music because like mom loved music. But in this one, it just is something that seemed like the captain hadn't wanted like to take the trouble to do. And so when Maria reintroduces it for the kids, for them to sing to the Baroness when he brings her to the house, um, he's like mesmerized and he's impressed and he's in shock, and everything goes to the wayside, and he forgives her for making them clothes out of drapes and disobeying his wishes because she's brought music in and he forgot how much he loved it. And then almost instantly Uncle Max goes and gets this huge puppet stage, and they, like you said, they become expert marionettes, seemingly, I mean, puppeteers overnight. But
Yeah.
it reminded me a little bit too of what was the one we just did with Ike? Escape to Witch Mountain. With Ike Eisenman, when he does, they have the marionettes in their room, and he's using his powers to make them dance. It reminded me a little bit of that. So, anyway, yeah, like
That's
even
funny.
like as he's churning this, it's like almost like they're really showing that they're giving it their all on how to do this. So it's
The other
just
one
there's so
I
much
thought
going
about
on. Go ahead.
was I forget if it's Farewell Goodnight, whatever the name of that song is, and the Family Guy version of that is what popped into my head. Just
Oh, with
and
Chris sneaking up the stairs,
yeah,
or Stewie. Yeah, that
but
was
yeah,
funny.
and the other one so the movie I watched last week for my channel, I'm about a month behind from between when I watched to when I publish an episode, was The Music Man. I had never seen that, and right now my month I'm doing is musicals. So for April to early May, it's musicals, and uh, you know, this week I'm going to be watching Fiddler on the Roof. We just discussed,
Yeah.
or so yeah, it's like those. Just thinking about Seth MacFarlane and the way he treats musicals and brings them into his shows. So I thought they were parodies, but there's now that I saw this, that parody seems so much more loving than I thought it was just a straight up parody, and so that's one of the things I was kind of taken aback when watching this. Is I mean I know he has a general and just genuine love for these things, and that really shined through when I was watching that.
Yeah. Michael Sullivan said in chat, Toy Story marionette show. No, sir. No, no, thank you. We prefer the Country Bears. Um, so the song that you were talking about, the Good Night song, is called "So Long Farewell." The Lonely Goat Herd is the actual name of that song, which I'm with you. Like, for some reason, I must have been sleeping during watching this originally because I don't remember the marionette show. And I wonder if that's one of the scenes that maybe they cut for time when they show this on network TV, because it's a 3 hour movie and it's been on network TV a bunch. And so I'm watching it thinking, even if it was a 3 hour night, if you put it on at 8 o'clock and you ran it to
Oh yeah.
11, which who would do that? Even at that point, you've still got to put commercials in, and so they must have cut something for time. Maybe that's what it is, or maybe I started falling asleep at that point. I don't really remember why, but again, I mean, as I'm sitting there, my wife's singing every single word to every single song and getting into it, and like, like the whole yes, no, like she's all over it. So I don't know. Well, also that seems to
When
be
we're
Jared's
on,
favorite line.
one of my favorite stories I ever heard about this film, and I had to look up to see if there was a source for it, and there was when this film wasn't just huge in the U.S., it was huge all over the world, except apparently Austria. They really, really did not like the film in Austria. Um, in Korea, in particular, being a 3 hour movie, they were still showing it like 5 or 6 times a day in the theater. So just think about that's basically a 24-hour theater running these things. So one theater owner in Seoul, apparently, to get more showings of the movie in, re-edited the film to cut out all the musical numbers.
What?
So the Sound of Music at this
With
one
no
theater,
music?
no music, just so he can
Well,
get more people in. And I never heard how it worked for him, but it was just a funny story about it.
what I do love about the structure of this movie is that through the first act, we only see the kids or Maria or the nuns singing. We don't see the captain singing because again, we are supposed to be like, I guess, like you said, he kind of looked evil, but off put by his stringent nature. And so we don't really see him singing until he has that heartfelt moment with the kids where they're singing and he starts singing with them. In that point, from that point on, he does sing and mix in. But for that first act, he really doesn't sing at all because we're supposed to think that he's too cold hearted. And then that moment when he trashes Maria for, how dare you parade my kids around town and let them climb trees and do things that children do when all I want is discipline, that shatters when the music starts. And now he kind of like throws in and sings here and there and is like a good sport about it. But I do think that that's important to the story, is that he warms up to the music and the Sound of Music has that effect on him. So the idea that they would cut the music out completely does save some time. It certainly does, but I do think that that's why would you like, that's why my wife loves this movie, is because of the music. She has an attachment to this movie because of the music, and I've said that about animated movies too. I think that's why movies like Moana do better than movies like Strange World, is because or Atlantis or Treasure Planet, is because they don't really have that musical tie that you carry with you afterwards. The songs that have the music with you, or that you love the music and take it with you, is the stuff you come back to. You were mentioning Wicked, great soundtrack. Same thing with Dear Evan Hansen. Some of these musicals really, I think, are driven obviously by the music. That's what this is, and just cutting it out seems to be it should be illegal because you got to have that.
I will, I
Go
will
ahead.
say the one musical number is this another song I know that I thought was so odd, though, especially the way it was shot, was "Climb Every Mountain," or is that the name of it?
Yes.
Like it's so dark, like not in tone, but just it's so weirdly shot and dark, and it just really kind of rips you out of the
Yeah,
movie for a moment there.
that's one she's singing in the convent that the Reverend Mother is singing to her, right?
Yeah,
Um, and
to
and
convince
it's
her to
it's
go back. Yeah.
it's climb every EV apostrophe RY mountain is how it's listed. But yeah, that is weird. That scene where she's in Reverend Mother's office, and she's singing like, "Hey, you can't hide here. You've got to go back to him because you're hiding out here just because you feel like, you know, it's safe here, and you have to like go in and understand if you love him or not, and maybe that's the Lord's plan, etc., etc." So it's very interesting to get that from a woman of faith, for her to tell her this may not be your path. You may need to go somewhere else. One of the things I noticed about that scene, other than like you said, like here's the scene in still shot, and you can't even see the Reverend Mother, and she's singing. So
It
it is
looks like
very
the Haunted
strange.
Mansion.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. The wallpaper looks like the freaking Haunted Mansion. I was gonna say, tell me it doesn't look like the Haunted Mansion, because you worked the Haunted Mansion. I thought, man, that's gonna pop out like that, right? So it does. I'm not making that up.
No, it definitely. I was looking at it's like, I mean, that whole scene it's jarring compared to the rest of the film, and I get like this is the darkest moment in the film where they were like till the time when the Nazis show up, but uh, I think they went a little too heavy on the symbolism there.
If that paper was purple, dude, or maybe just had a couple eyeballs popping out, I don't know, man. But I felt like that was totally Haunted Mansion when I was seeing that. So yeah, I'm glad that you were the same thing. But yeah, and it is dark and dreary, and they're singing a very uplifting song, so it does seem slightly out of place. And that was something that, again, as we're watching, my wife commented on her, being in the shadows and how moving that actually was. So I was just like, okay. So
Yeah, I missed the symbolism in that one altogether. To me, of her in the shadows, it doesn't fit the tone of the song to me.
gotcha.
But I also know that they filmed all those scenes in the Abbey were kind of what they would have to do because a lot of the interior sets were in LA, but the only things they were filming interior were those monastery scenes in Salzburg. So those were what they would do on rainy days. So maybe they were trying to use external lighting and they couldn't get it in because it was a dark day. But maybe that had something to do with that. That's the only thing I could think of.
Yeah. Um, so let's go back to and just to finish up with the music. So how many hits we've got here, or things that people know, like obviously the Hills Are Alive with the Sound of Music, and that scene, like I said, was iconic. Was even in the Great Movie Ride with her, spinning around, and I mean in the
I have it
thing at the end.
the logo for my channel. Like the silhouette of it is part of the logo for my channel because it's
Yeah.
such an iconic silhouette. Like I mean, I can't think of anything more than people go. I know that movie from just a shadow.
Right. I have confidence. I don't think was big, but my favorite things, Do Re Mi, Maria, like How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria, So Long Farewell, Climb Every Mountain, Edelweiss, and 16 Going on 17. All of those songs, just again, are legendary. So and kind of permeate beyond the movie. So it is interesting to go back to the source material and go, oh, that's where the Lonely Goat Herd came from, or that's where Climb Every Mountain is from, because people sing it in other venues. So
Yeah,
music, again, hugely important to this movie, in general.
it
So
becomes
I'm glad.
standards.
Yeah. And I mean, it seems dumb to say it's called The Sound of Music, and it was a musical, but it is important, and it's different from most of them further along the story in a lot of ways, as opposed to the showstoppers. When you do Be Our Guest, it's not really forwarding that story along, but in the situation like, the I Have Confidence, we're getting a feel of Maria and who she is and what she stands for. Do Re Mi is important to know them singing and such. So a
Yeah,
lot of it used in
there are musicals
montage.
that were there are musicals where the songs can shine like this, and there are musicals where it's about like the choreography has to go along with the song to make it memorable. And I think like watching The Music Man last week, that was one of them. Things like Newsies. Newsies is a great stage musical, but it is about watching it on stage more than just listening to the music. It's the choreography makes those songs and certain things. And this, with the simple choreography that they did for any of these, the songs do stand out even more.
Yep. Okay. Well, let's move on then. And I feel like you've just seen this movie, so it'd be unfair to ask you any trivia questions about it. But because you also did a deep dive, I'm going to go ahead and ask you a couple. You ready?
I saw it once, and it's about a month ago now. So okay.
Great disclaimer. You know what? They might be easy for you. So hang on and let's see what you think. Again, I was thinking maybe not. Do you know the captain's first name?
Gregor.
Uh, they pronounce it Georg, and it's pronounced George. I mean, it's spelled like George without an e, but they pronounce it
Yeah,
Georg in there.
I knew it was a
Uh,
G, but and that's the real dad's name. The kids' names I know got mixed up a little bit, but
the Baroness's first name?
begins with an E. That's all I can remember.
Oh, let it go.
It's Elsa.
Yes.
I thought it was
Um,
longer than that. I thought it was something longer,
no.
but
You wouldn't remember this, but when Elsa's talking about getting him a gift, she names three things she was thinking about getting him as a wedding gift. Do you remember any of the three things she said she was going to get him as a wedding gift? It's right before they break things off, and she's talking about, I felt like I need to get you a gift, and these are the things I thought of.
I feel like there was like a house on the water was one of them.
French villa. Yeah, so a
Yeah,
villa,
was
a fountain
a
pen.
watch?
No, a fountain
Was
pen
there
and
a
a
no?
yacht. Two yachts, one to sail and one for his bathtub. I just thought that was interesting. And final question, and this may be completely inaccurate to real life, but in the movie, um, do you know the ages of the children?
Uh, well, 16 going on 17 is the oldest,
Yep, there
and
you
I
go.
think it's uh 4 was the youngest at the start.
Five.
5. Yeah.
Yeah.
It seemed like
And,
they did like the every 2 years basically for the kids kind of thing.
right. So it was 16, 14, 13, 11, 10, 7 on Tuesday. So in other words, when she announces how old she is, it was when they were lined up and she said tell me your ages. When she steps forward, she says, I'll be 7 on Tuesday. So at the time we're introduced to her, she's not 7, but days later she will be 7. And then 5 for the youngest one. Which, by the way, as we were watching that, my wife's kind of rattling off some interesting trivia, and apparently the little girl who was the 5-year-old didn't know how to swim, and in the section with the boat where they rock the boat and they all fall off, she's desperately going to try to cling on to the side of the boat because she doesn't know how to swim. And then when they cut away and you come back to it, you see that they are basically carrying her out of the water because she couldn't swim. So you know
The way they used to do those.
the way they used to treat children, right?
Well, just not children, like actresses in general. It was the Marlon
So
Brando
watch right
brother
here.
scene came up
You
in
see her
something
pop
else.
up
Yeah.
real quick by the boat, right there, and she's grasping onto it. And then when they come back, she's being carried, and she's much drier than the rest of them. So I think that they probably went in and like brought her out and then brought her back in only for that one scene. But good for her for going back if she almost drowned the first one.
Yeah, I mean that's all in the casting director as far as I'm concerned.
Let's talk about the Baroness for a second, though, because I feel like there's always that I don't want to say like the evil villain because she's not a villain. She's rich, so she's not trying to get his money. Like when I think about the Parent Trap, at least the Lindsay Lohan version, the woman they're trying to save Dad from is like she's a money grubber. She wants to latch on to him, and she wants nothing to do with the kids. In this scenario, the Baroness is a very similar kind of a character where she doesn't really want anything to do with the kids, and she uses that same age-old threat. Gonna send them to boarding school. That's always what the step parent wants to do is send them to boarding school. Let me get in here and I want to have this perfect relationship with this person, but I don't want to have anything to their every movie. I feel like that's the threat is send them to boarding school. Has to have a
Yeah,
bad
I mean, I
reputation
think
for boarding schools.
I think it's something my stepdad used to say, not because he wanted my mom without me there. It just was always the threat of punishment was to go to like a military school kind of thing.
Yeah,
I don't
military.
think she was as harsh as I was expecting because I've heard people trash talk the character before seeing the film, and I mean, until that scene, like she wasn't as bad as I was thinking like Cinderella level wicked stepmother out of her, and it just wasn't there. Like I think she generally appreciated uh, like at times did appreciate the family, but just still kind of. I don't think she wanted to send them off to get rid of them. I think she wanted to send them off because 7 kids is a bit overwhelming. One kid is a bit overwhelming at times.
Yeah. Well, but see there again. I mean, that's where we see the Maria step in, and Maria, who doesn't have any experience with kids, is great with 7 kids. She loves them. They love her. She's really good at honestly manipulating them. That scene in the beginning where she sits down on the pine cone and doesn't say anything about it, and then says, "Oh, thank you so much for that gift today. It really made me feel welcome and special." And they all start crying. I was like, wow, that's dark. Like she's playing with their emotions right off the bat, but she really was able to read the situation, know what how to handle these kids who have been through 12 governesses. And so this baroness is probably going to have a governess as well theoretically, but it's just there's a weird scene where he announces to well, let's back up a second. The baroness kind of is the big nasty when she drives Maria away, right?
See, I still didn't feel that. I just feel like a lot of it was more internalized between everybody. I don't think it was her pushing Maria that far away. It was Maria felt she was being pushed out because obviously she was in love with the guy and she knew it wasn't going to be. So it was her own emotions pushing her. And I think that's what that whole scene with the back in the abbey is like. It's like, all right, so you can't be with them even though you love them, but you love the kids too, and they need you, and that was the
Yeah.
pushback. So I don't think it was I didn't read the. Maybe it was because I was expecting her to be more overbearing, like kind of uh, just more menacing, and she didn't come off as well. So maybe I'm just giving her a little bit of a pass, just because I was expecting something worse.
Gotcha. Well, again, there are very subtle things with her. It's not as in your face, but at first she feels like she's kind of like, well, there's always boarding school. That's what boarding schools are for. And then there's the scene where she goes into the room and is going to help Maria get dressed. She's clearly not there to help her. She's there to drive her away. And then after she goes back downstairs and she's in the ballroom with Max, she's like, well, things are going to work out better for me. You're going to have to be coming to me to get his influence because I'm going to be the only woman in his life. Like that, clearly there was manipulation there, and yet it wasn't like in your face. So it was interesting to
And the way she
see.
just
Go ahead.
kind of flies the white flag at the end, like it's like she just admits she's been beaten, like readily, and just goes away. Like I'm like, well, that felt a little anticlimactic at that, but then you realize it's not really the climax of the story, obviously.
Right, and that actually was kind of where I was going with this is that it's the nicest breakup in history, especially for people who've gotten to the marriage level of him looking out there and she walks out on the terrace and she's like, "Hey," and then she looks down and sees Maria and she's like, "Oh." And then she starts into the whole, "I was going to buy you this great wedding gift." And then he's like, "Well," and he starts to break up with her and then she goes, "Let me stop you right there. I don't think you're the man for me. It's been great, but I'm going to go pack my bags and go back to Vienna." And he's like, "Yeah, well, I understand." Like, so it's like the nicest breakup of all time. But then he immediately, upon breakup, runs out into the woods and makes out with the nanny and proposes to her. Is that how
Yeah,
things go back in the
that
day?
was a little quick of a turnaround on that. I mean, I always get the feeling like their relationship, the Baroness and the Captain, was more about status for both of them than it was any kind of real warmth there. Uh, but I think there was some, they didn't hate each other, obviously, but I really think it was being driven more by that, you know, aristic, like trying to keep things aristocratic between everybody, and there's only so many you could do more than the genuine affection. And that's when she's like, well, I'm not going to sit around for this. So it's just like, I don't really care that much. I'll find somebody else.
Here's the last. I agree with all of that. Here's the last thing I thought about the governess is there was that scene. So he proposes to Maria. He's like, "Is there anybody we should ask?" She goes, "How about the kids?" And then the kids, of course, are all excited about it. But before that, the scene when they find out the Baroness is going to be their new mother, he says, "You're not going to have a new governess. You're going to have a new mother." And they line up in this like almost like a funeral dirge and come and like kiss her on the cheek, and it just feels so like ugh, kind of like, oh, this is going to be your new mom, and they're just defeated, and they're like, okay, I'm going to kiss her on the cheek. But when they go, but fast forward again to the point where Maria is in her wedding dress. She gets married, huge church wedding that seems to have come together very quickly. And then they go off for a month honeymoon. I don't know how long your honeymoon was. Mine wasn't a month, but it must be a nice way to get to know each other is to spend a month together. But when they come back, they have the news that the Germans have taken over. Captain von Trapp has been called into action with the German army, and he's to report immediately to Berlin. And he's like, we're gonna have to run because I'm not gonna be a part of this. Which is again, now you're like looking at him. He's a man who's standing up for his principles. He wants to protect his family. They're going to go on the run. Would the Baroness have done that with him? I don't think so.
I know a lot of the characters we saw very clearly how they stood on the uh, German takeover. I don't remember her being one of the ones we really got the opinion out of. I mean, I think
But
she was a
still, I
proud
mean,
Austrian, but I also, yeah.
she looks like she was though used to a certain lifestyle, and I don't think she's going to get that on the run. Like she wants to live in this
No.
nice place. She doesn't want to, I cannot imagine that based on the character they've been describing to us throughout this movie that they would have just let her that she would have just like said, okay, sure, now that we're married, I'll go ahead and go with you and live on your principles and flee the country and live in the woods. She wouldn't have done that. I don't think.
No,
So it was again a good
I,
thing that Maria was there to be with him for that. So.
yeah.
And then there's that evil scene at the end with Rolf tracking down the family, and he's turned, and he kind of represents the whole country at this point, right? Not the whole country, but some of the people in the country who have decided that they're forgiving friendship for the mother country. They've fallen so in line, and that's I guess what Rolf represents here, right?
Yeah, and I mean, maybe it's also supposed to be trying to say, like these kids were so influenced because he was a kid, and maybe it's not on them, and that was trying to at the considering the movie was very true to the musical. The musical was very true to the German film. The German film was pretty true to her book. So, I mean, obviously we've talked about some of the changes, but you know, they are maybe in the German versions they're trying to heal a little bit and say, look, these kids didn't know what they were doing. I mean, Ralph's still the heavy of the film, and yeah, he's kind of a jerk, but like I wonder if that's why it was the young person to kind of turn them in was more of trying to show how insidious Nazism was there, and the kids were just being were so getting caught up in it, they might not have been clearly thinking.
Yeah. Oh well. Well, it was nice when they were going to be a family together, but Rolf decided to keep with the red armband instead of the Von Trapp family.
Yeah.
So when this is all said and done, the nuns come to the rescue and strip mine the cars because everybody knows how good nuns are at being auto mechanics, and then they take off into the hills. Okay. So again, this was your first watch through this movie. So I think we've talked about most everything in this movie. Again, it's almost a 3-hour runtime. So that's a big ask, but I think that I'm I'm anxious to hear what you think about this movie. So I'm going to go ahead and first ask again everyone who is watching. Thank you for watching. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe to WDWNT TV. Don't forget to watch Disney Entertainment News Today that dropped yesterday, and also Deep in the Plus will be back again next Wednesday night. So please join us then. Also, Park Center, we'll probably do something special in Park Center. It's going to be the 25th anniversary of the Animal Kingdom, so we'll be down there for that. If you can join us in Orlando for that event, we would love to see you there. So come by and say hi. But Ron, this is it, man. This is the big one. The people need to know. You've just seen this for the very first time, but would you recommend this movie?
I definitely would recommend it. I think it is a classic. It's, it's a deserved Best Picture winner. It is something that, gets referenced. It's in our vernacular as a culture. Am I going to sit and watch this a lot, like yearly, like your wife? No, I'm definitely not. I think it was a good movie, but it is, as good as it was, it still felt long at times. And I don't think I could sit through this on a regular basis. Will I watch it again with my daughter at some point? Yeah, I probably will. But I don't think it's going to be a regular thing. And, I think this is one of the maxims I have on my channel is I could say something's good, but I don't like it. And I do like this, but I don't think I like it as much as a lot of people do. It's still a very good film. So, yeah, that's it. And I do also want to say, if you like to hear me talk about films, just check out Ron Hasn't Seen on YouTube. And, I'm doing a weekly thing. It's me, guests. I've had Patrick on before. We discussed, what did we discuss? The Apartment. I've had Ashley was my first guest. And Rob's going to be talking with this and me again, and should be out either later this week or next for that. And I edited mine's not live. There's some editing done on those. So,
Gotcha. All right, very cool. So, I mean, for me, I would say that I would definitely recommend this movie. It is iconic. I say that and drink proudly for every time we say the word iconic. That said, I agree with you. It's a long movie. And I don't think I would revisit it. I've seen it in different forms at different times. Maybe it's been on, maybe I've turned it on, or maybe my wife has just been watching it. But for me, I would say you almost have to see this movie. Like you said, it's part of our culture in so many ways because of the music, and you would want to know that and all the bits that they do. There actually was an anime off of this that I found, and the 2013 Carrie Underwood live Sound of Music that was on, and like you said, the 1956 German film, and so many references in TV and culture. So I would definitely recommend you see it. It is a good movie, like you said. It is not one of those that I think I would go back to over and over again as a comfort movie like I would Empire Strikes Back or Nightmare Before Christmas or whatever, but it is definitely a good movie, and I'm glad we got to sit down and watch it together, my friend. So thank you for doing that. And thank you guys for watching home. And again, next week we're going to do Mrs. Doubtfire, another Fox acquirement of Disney. So please make sure to join myself and Allison for that one. In the meantime, I hope you guys have a great week, and we will see you next time.
Bye.